Welcome back to another episode of Out of the Bubble podcast. My name is Rachel Peru. I hope you've all had a good week. I've been feeling so grateful to the amount of amazing women that have been coming forward, wanting to share their stories on the podcast. And today's guest is no exception. Today we're going to be talking to Shandra Shultz. And Shandra is an integrative life coach and energy healer, and somebody who has overcome some huge hurdles in life. Including having a traumatic brain injury that left her without memory for 6 years. She's going to be telling us how she overcome all these huge hurdles, but also how she's now rebuilt her life and is helping others. So grab a coffee, sit back and enjoy. Good morning, Shandra. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, Rachel.
And I'll say good morning to you because you've got up super early for me at 7 o'clock this morning because you're in Colorado. So thank you. I really appreciate that.
Of course. It's my pleasure.
So for people that don't know you, Shandra, we've connected through Instagram and through Facebook, which I know another social media contact. I love that platform. For people that don't know you, how do you describe yourself?
So do you mean in like a business sense or just an overall sense?
Overall, how do you introduce yourself to people?
I introduced myself to people as a extremely spiritual woman who has, I guess I call myself a comeback kid. And I let people know that no matter what life can do to try and bring you down, you can always find the good in it and turn it around.
Yeah, I love the comeback kid. That's perfect, isn't it? That's amazing to say that. Yeah. I mean, I don't know where to start with your journey because you have overcome so many different hurdles to get to where you are now, flourishing. So I guess we have to start back at the beginning. You know, where does your story start in terms of the first kind of big hurdles in life that you really struggled with?
So as a young child, at a young age of 6, I actually dealt with sexual assault. And it was very brief, but as with any child, it had a big impact on my life. And I wouldn't know that until I was in my late teens. And I dealt with it. The first thing that I really dealt with after that was because I didn't understand what had happened. I started to blame myself. So I started to become a compulsive overeater. And then I would get other forms of disordered eating. And I was picked on throughout my time at school because I was so different. I've always been very, as we call it now, woo. And so I was always the strange kid. I was always very, very smart, thinking far ahead of what I was, supposed to be at different ages. And so I felt ostracized. And I just continued to do my own thing, but I was always searching for the love and the friendship and companionship. And after I graduated high school, I found that. I got really heavily into the party culture here in the United States. They call them raves. I know that sometimes they call festivals over in the UK. And it was great. I found my tribe, or at least I thought I found my tribe. And I went through a lot of really traumatic things in that time. I lost a lot of friends to addiction or to traumatic events. In that time, my father got sick with cancer and I had to watch him slowly pass. So life just got really, really difficult. And I always kept saying to myself, why is this happening to me? What have I done wrong? I always thought it was something I did. And I later came to realize as I leaned on my spirituality that it wasn't anything that I did specifically. It was more of the life that I wanted to, as a spiritual individual, experience. But I didn't understand that. We don't have that foresight at that point until we go through some of these things.
Yeah.
I had a child very young. I was 22 and I was a single mom. And the relationship I had been in with her biological father, or now because they're non-binary, the relationship I had with their father was very abusive. And I did everything I could to save them from dealing with it, but I sacrificed myself.
Yeah.
And I fell deep into addiction. And I stayed there for almost another 8 years after I had my daughter. and went through a lot more traumatic type events. And I kept asking myself, why? What is going on? Why is this happening to me? I didn't really know the why until I was 31. And at 31, at that point in my life, I had really been beat down. I had gone through some really bad mental health problems. I was extremely overweight for a number of years, and then I got to a healthy weight, but it wasn't in a healthy way.
Yeah.
And then one day, and this is where I learned to start listening to my intuition. One day it had been raining, and I remember hearing myself say, hey, you shouldn't go out to work. Like, don't go drive. Just don't go drive. And I pushed it off. I said, no, I don't want to work. So I'm just going to make myself do it. I later found out that was the intuitive hit from the universe trying to tell me, hey, if you go out today, something bad's going to happen. And it did. I found myself in a really traumatic car accident where I had suffered a brain injury, and I did not remember my life.
Which I just can't, to go through all that you've just explained and gone through, and all that self-sabotage and all that those issues that you've had to deal with to then get to that point, I can't imagine did you know instantly after the crash that you had these injuries, or how did that manifest itself?
So as soon as I had been knocked unconscious, because the car I was driving, and I was in the car accident, and the car was totaled, and I came to, and everything felt really weird. I was like, something's off. And if you've ever seen the movie 13 Going on 30 with Jennifer Garner, that's exactly how it felt. I literally looked at myself in the mirror of my rearview mirror, and I was like, that's not me. Who is this person?
Wow.
Like, what? And I had this disconnect, and I remembered saying to myself, okay, I need to do something. And I couldn't quite remember what I needed to do, but I looked down and I happened to see my phone. So I picked it up and I looked through it, and I was like, okay, I don't recognize any of these names or numbers, but the word that stood out was mom. And it was like I had this knowing, okay, that's who I need to call. So I called, and I let my mom know that I had been in a car accident. I was very, like, trying to think of the word. I know the technical term, which is flat affect, but it's very like, you're just not emotional. And like, I was just like, hi, I've been in an accident. Can you come get me? And my mom didn't recognize anything was wrong, because of course she's just thinking, oh my God, my daughter's been in an accident. I've got to go get her. And when she showed up, I saw her and I recognized the picture that was on my phone. So I was like, and I kind of looked at her and I was like, okay, she looks a little bit like me after what I've seen in the mirror. And then she said my name, and I was like, okay. It didn't quite feel right, the name that she was calling me, but I had looked around at my papers I'd given the officers and stuff, so I knew that was the name that I had. And then the next moment I remember, and this is the most poignant thing that ever happened in my life, was I saw this little girl run out from behind my mom, and she just came up and grabbed me around the legs and screamed, "Mommy, oh my God, you're alive." And I just kind of like did this freeze thing, because I was like, this child, she was 9 at the time. They were 9 at the time. And I was like, what? I looked at myself and I'm like, I'm a mom. I felt like I was a teenager. I was like, there's no way I could have this child that was almost a teenager themselves. I was like, what is this? But I didn't know how to tell them what was going on. So I went along with it.
Gosh.
And I wrote I wrote a blog post off of a journaling challenge that I did. And I remember writing in the blog post that in those moments, I had to have faith that these people knew me. I had to have faith that they weren't going to do anything bad to me. And I had to trust them that they were saying who they were and all of this. And I went home with them, but I didn't tell them for weeks. I mean, my daughter didn't know for almost a year and a half that I had this brain injury that I forgot.
Goodness me.
I felt like I was living a lie, because I couldn't tell them that I didn't remember them, because I knew that they'd already gone through such a huge trauma of almost losing me. To tell them that I wasn't who they thought I was, I felt like I was a fraud.
So you still had that subconscious enough to know that you didn't want to hurt people that were here, that
Yeah.
you knew you had this connection with but couldn't figure it
Yeah.
out. It's interesting that you still
Yes.
had that within you, didn't you?
Yeah. It was like a knowing. And that was the first time that I really understood that my intuition was something real and that like it wasn't just something to be pushed off. And I remember walking in the door of the house that first night and seeing all the pictures of myself with them. And that's when it sealed it in, like, this is your family. You may not remember them. That's okay. And I remember going into the bathroom and looking myself in the mirror and saying, who are you? Like, who are you? And it took me on a journey that I spent the last 6.5, almost 7 years of finding out who I am. But in order to find out who I am now, I had to find out who I was, because I didn't know. And it was such, like, it felt like a moral imperative for me to find out who I was. Like, it was, and that's where I realized that so many of those programs and beliefs started to come through at that point that were just automatic in my brain. It was like, okay, who am I? So I searched to find who I was. And I happened to find that I had 12 years worth of journals. And I went through and I read them like cover to cover multiple times. And I still didn't know who I was. I was like, well, this person is a very sad, very angry, very bitter person. And I don't want to be this person, because I had been. I mean, I dealt with a lot of trauma, a lot of loss, a lot of abuse, and I didn't want to be that person anymore. And so I remember I happened to be Celtic pagan, and I looked around my room because I literally locked myself in my room for almost 3 weeks. I was so scared of letting them know who I was, or wasn't, I guess. And so I got to a point where I was so depressed that I was like, if I don't do something, I'm going to have to kill myself, because I can't be here anymore. It just doesn't work. It doesn't feel good to be here, being in this space. And I remember looking, and I saw a book about Celtic paganism in all my books that I had in my room. And so I sat down and read, and it was in June of 2014 that this all happened. And so the summer solstice was coming up. And I remember something in me as I was sitting there, I was like, what am I to do? And I got really quiet, and I heard this voice say, ask the goddess what to do. And I was like, oh, okay. How do I do that? And I heard a voice say, dedicate yourself. So, okay. So I went to my books and I learned, and I literally wrote down like this dedication. And on the 21st of June in 2014, I lit a candle. I said, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm dedicating my life to you. And it happened to be the Celtic Breed that I decided to dedicate to. And I said, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to dedicate myself to you. And whatever is meant for me, please send it to me. Of course, I've come to learn you need to be a little bit more careful when you ask for what you want, because the universe will literally send you anything. And it was so funny, because on the 24th of June, my daughter happened to meet my now husband. And she saw him. She had parked her bike in his spot, and he had come home in his black truck, and it happened to be in the garage spot next to ours. And apparently he'd been living across the street from us for 6 months, and I had never seen him. But I'd seen his truck. I did start, as things started to slowly, it took almost 6 years to get it all to come back. But slowly things came back, and I started to remember, oh, well, I saw his truck there. She decided that she was going to park her bike because she was playing with her friend. And when he came home, he asked her to move it. And he happened to be in the military at the time. And she saw his uniform, and she asked him if he was in service. And he said yes. And she said, thank you for your service, and skipped off.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, she had been watching the Lindsay Lohan version of Parent Trap at that time. And she got it into her little 9-year-old brain, or their little 9-year-old brain, that this was going to make mommy happy. So she set me up the next day doing the same thing for me to meet him. And when I saw him, and I saw him in his uniform, I said, thank you for your service. He connected the two of us together. And then he looked down at my wrists, and I have these tattoos. You can see them here.
Oh, yeah.
Triquetra. And he looked at me and he said, "Oh, I love your triquetra." And I just kind of stopped, and I was like, "What?" Like, it's not a very common thing here, especially in the United States. And for him to know how to say it and know what it was, I was like, "What?" And I listened, and I was like, "Okay, I hear you. I hear you. This is what you're sending to me." And we have been together ever since that night. That was June 25th of 2014.
That's such a great story. I love that.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And
how did you get, what was the journey? I mean, at what point did you, after the accident, did you go and seek medical advice and say, listen, there is something not right? How did you get that help in the end?
So I went to, my mom had me go to our chiropractor that we had known for our entire lives, who had worked on me from the time I was little, worked on my daughter, you know, all of us through multiple accidents, through my dad's sicknesses. He was like a second dad to me. And so my mom took me to him, and I told him, I said, "You can't tell anyone, but I don't know who you are. I don't know who any of these people are. I don't remember anything." And he was, at first he didn't believe me. Because of my addictive past. He thought, "Oh, well, she's just, you know," a lot of people did.
Yeah.
And it even though he was able to see that I had the brain injury, he was like, "I don't know if you're actually dealing with what you're dealing with." So it took me almost 6 months after that point to actually go and get someone to look at me. And because I started having this speech and all this, and it was actually my husband who prompted me to do it. He was like, "Hey, I've noticed you're having some speech issues. I noticed you're having some struggle. My mom had said something to me, 'Why aren't you reading?' And apparently I had been an avid reader before, reading somewhere upwards of 200 to 300 books a year. And now I found that now as that was my escape. So I was trying to keep myself sober by reading. I just ended up teaching myself a lot of different things because I read a lot of romance novels. And so I expected life to be a certain way that it wasn't. And so she had said to me, "You know, you're not reading." And I was like, "Well, I can't understand the words. They don't make sense to me. They're jumbled." And I had been having the speech issues, and they had noticed that I had been singing a lot as to responses. Like I would respond in song. And so they were like, "You know, let's get just looked at." And unfortunately, I was on Medicaid at the time, and so I wasn't able to go as quickly as I would have liked to. It took almost 6 months for me to see somebody, and a lot happens in that time. So when I finally did see someone, they were like, "Okay, yeah, we see you've got these issues." They still couldn't say anything about the amnesia, because they were like, "We don't understand it. Like, we don't know why it happens. We know, you know, when you have a massive brain injury, that things like that happen, but there's no telltale signs of, yes, this person has it or this person doesn't." So they just kind of had to believe me. And I'm grateful for the doctors believing me, because they were the first ones outside of my husband to do so. My mom was very traumatized at the time, so she didn't believe anything that I was saying as far as I was having this trouble. And she actually thought that I was, and I found out later it was because our chiropractor had been talking to her, and he didn't believe me. And so they kind of together started believing their own stories. And so they made life very challenging for me for a while, because I kept remembering my mom saying to me, "Don't you remember? Don't you remember? This is what you used to do," trying to tell me this is how I was, but it didn't feel in alignment with who I was becoming. And so it was a very challenging time for about 1.5 years. We went through a lot of internal family issues, to the point that my mom and I, who had been like best friends, and I later came to find out we were actually codependent with each other. So she had a break mentally and was just in a very different place than I even understood at that time. And we ended up having a lot of family fights. And finally I was like, you know, I can't continue doing this. It's affecting my health, and I need to figure things out. I can't be the best version of myself when we're constantly fighting every day. And this isn't good for my daughter. And so I had my mom moved out, and my daughter went to go live with my mom. And I started the journey at that point, and that was in 2016. I started the journey towards really finding out how to heal myself and recover. So that was a challenge. For a year and a half, I really couldn't do anything other than just fight for my life.
Yeah, and how does it, when you got to that point when you could start rebuilding again, how easy was it to accept the past that had gone and to accept that that person was somebody very different to who you are now? Was there a real conflict there?
Oh, yes, definitely. One of the biggest things that I had found in myself was that the person I was before did not have any faith. Was a very, the person I was before had become very dark, very depressed, just didn't want to live. And I actually remembered when I started reading through my journals and I got to the year closest to when my accident happened, I actually started to find a recurring theme of, I don't want to live. I don't want to live. Life doesn't have any meaning to me. I don't want to live. And it was so crazy because I looked at the person I was in the mirror and I was like, I want to live. I have a desire to live. I want to be here. I want to be able to enjoy my life. I can't imagine that I would get to this space where I'd actually be asking for death. But as things started to come back to me, as my memories started to get re-triggered based upon different things, and I happened to live in the same city for my entire life pretty much, so I would be triggered by just random signs.
Mm.
And I started to remember why she was the way she was. And I was like, I can't go back there. I don't want to go back there. I want to be living in the light. I don't want to live in the darkness anymore. I had to find out though that I had to go to those dark places in order to heal what was holding me back. And so it was a very it was a challenging time because I remember my husband actually said to me at the time, he was like, honey, you need to let her go. You've got to let her go. And it was at that time that I started to take on the name that I now have, which is Shandra, because that wasn't my birth name. I didn't feel in connection with that name anymore. And I realized that the only way I was going to be able to let her go was to take and burn all of the journals that I had for 12 years that I had been ruminating on. I had to burn that energy. I had to let it go. And that's what I did. And I said from that moment forward, I was going to start finding out who I am, not who I was.
Yeah. And it's and you know, as awful as that experience is, and I cannot begin to imagine, it has actually given you a second chance at life, hasn't it? Well, you know, looking on a positive side, it has given you this whole new way of you being able to say, okay, what do I really want out of life, and go for it, which is empowering.
Yes. It is. It's very empowering. And what I remember and what I hold to even now is that not everyone gets a second chance. And I have so many people, my dad, you know, my best friends that passed away while in my early 20s, even, you know, animals and things like that have gone since. I'm like, they don't get that second chance. Not everybody gets this. What are you? And that was my thing, is I remember writing myself down in some of my newer journals. I was like, you have a second chance. What are you going to do with it? And when that moment hit, it was like, okay, what am I here to do? What's my life really about? What's my purpose? I started to think about the things that were outside of me that created who I was. And that's when I started to realize, okay, I'm a healer. And when I looked back on it, I'd always been a healer. Like, I remember my mom actually later saying to me that when I was little, because when I started to do different healing modalities like Reiki and shamanic medicine, and my mom said to me, well, you know, when you were a little girl, you used to go and put your hands on people, and you'd tell them you were sending them love and light, and they would feel better. At the time, I didn't realize I was using my own energy, not source energy, which is, I later came to realize that's what I needed to be doing. But I realized that I had this purpose of healing, helping people to heal, and that I was here. And as I started to delve deeper and deeper into my spirituality, I found that I actually was here to help to lead others who have gone through similar situations, or have gone through other situations where it feels like life is just ready to be over. And you're like, I just want to be done with it. It's like, but do you really?
Yeah.
Like, is that really what you want? Or is it just that you want to find a way out?
Mm.
And so I dedicated my life to becoming the healer that I now am. And I've spent the last 4, almost 5 years working towards that end.
That's really beautiful. And it's interesting because I interviewed a lady called Jennifer McKenzie, who's had a very similar experience to you in terms of, you know, the issues that she had as a young adult and young woman with addictions, and she had a really difficult time. And very similar to you, said that when she was younger, she knew, looking back now, that she had this ability to heal. And her parents talked about it as being a young child, but it was that inability to heal yourself first, wasn't it, that you had
Yes,
to
it really
work through?
was. Oh, yeah, it really was. And I spent the greater part of the last 5 years working on that.
Mm.
And it's so funny because I found myself in a place where I was able to move headlong into like the processing of mental stuff. But what I found along the way as I was doing all of that is that it was the doing. I wasn't allowing it to actually release from my body. And so I found out that, you know, the body actually holds a lot. Like, we don't, while our brain holds all the storing of the processing like a computer, our bodies are what hold a lot of that information as well, because we have all of our neurons and we have all of our everything throughout the body. So it's like, oh, okay, so I can process up here as much as I want, but if I also don't allow my body to feel it and heal it, it's just going to keep affecting me.
Yeah. Yeah, and I get the it's interesting because I really like doing yoga, and I've only just been reading about it recently. But whenever I do certain types of yoga, I find myself at the end of it with tears rolling down my face, and I couldn't work out
Yeah.
why. It's like, this is pathetic. What's going on? And then I read about it, and it is that your body releasing the inner stuff in a different physical way through the yoga, and it's really interesting how our bodies can adapt, isn't it?
Oh, it is. It's amazing. There's an amazing book called The Body Keeps the Score. And it was reading that book when I was able to start reading again, that really helped me to understand that, you know, your body has its own muscle memory, and it's that memory that's remembering everything. And so no matter what you work through in your brain, if you don't work it through in your body, whether it be by yoga or by massage or myofascial or any of these other types of modalities, it's still going to be there. So you may be like, well, why is this happening to me? I've worked through this trauma. Well, yeah, you worked through it mentally, but did you work through it physically? So, yeah.
But you talked a lot about how, you know, especially at the beginning of this process, you really had to trust what was going on, and you had to trust the process. And I think a lot of women, particularly in midlife, do have to find that trust again, to realize that they can do what they want to do, and that self-belief. And what advice could you give to women that are feeling lost for whatever reason, that do need to find that trust in themselves again?
I think the first thing I would say is ask yourself, like, give yourself one thing that you absolutely love, and then work from there. Because if you find that you're lost, it's more that you've kind of lost your own sense of purpose, and therefore then lost who you are. Because a lot of women, and I found this throughout the last 7 years with it from my accident even, is we find ourselves remembering that we're supposed to be givers, and we're supposed to do, and we're supposed to, you know, focus on everything outside of ourselves. And we do that to such an extent that we forget to focus on what's going on inside ourselves, and we lose our sense of self. My husband, in the process of all this, got released from active duty and then became permanently disabled, and I had to take on caregivership. And I remember at the beginning, I was so frustrated because I was like, I have to choose between him and me. And so many women, especially at midlife, have had to choose, or feel like they had to choose, either being a mom, being a career woman, being a wife, doing all of this, and they lose their sense of self.
Yeah.
So the first thing you have to do is you have to get back to you. Like, you have to be like, okay, who am I? And if who I am doesn't align with who I desire being, how can I shift that? What can I do? How can I get in tune with what I really want in life? And that's where I see a lot of women, especially women I work with, they're like, I don't know, I've been a mom my entire adult life, or I've been a wife, or or I'm dealing with all of, I didn't become a mom and a wife because I was told that I needed to have a career. And now I'm 45, 50, 60 years old. And I'm sitting here going, I didn't have any children. I didn't have a family. What value do I have? And our value is within ourselves. We are valuable because we are. And that's the first thing I would say to any woman, any listener, is that find what lights you up and go from there, because everything else will fall into place when you find out what lights you up and who you are truly deep down inside. And it is a process. Sometimes you have to go through the mucky stuff. You have to do with all the traumas. You have to release all of that, because kind of like Shrek says in the movie, we're all like onions. We have layers. And so we have to peel back all of these layers to find out who we are, because those are the layers that society and our families and our culture and our limiting beliefs have put on us. So we lose our sense of self.
Yeah. Yeah. And you are a perfect example of how you have completely, you did physically, lose yourself, and now you found yourself again. Do you feel like, when you look at the whole experience now, would you change anything? Are you glad that this experience has happened to you, looking back, because it's made you who you are now? Or do you wish you could turn the clocks back?
I won't lie and say there aren't times that I wish I could turn the clock back, especially after I met my husband, and I started to remember parts of my life and start to realize, oh man, I'd been heading towards you for so many years, and I kept letting fear override me, and I would run away.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't go towards where my heart was feeling drawn. So it's not that I want to change the past, it's that I just wish that I had listened to myself, that inner voice, sooner. Yeah. Because then maybe I wouldn't have had to go through all of that. But then I look at it on the flip side, and I'm like, if I hadn't gone through all of that, I wouldn't be who I am. And I absolutely love who I am now, versus I didn't really love myself before. I could say I love you, and I was very vain. I'd look in the mirror and be like, oh yeah, I love you. Like, you're hot. Like I was very external. It wasn't internal.
Yeah.
And so and of course the adolescent part of me wants to go, well, yeah, you turn back the clock. You don't have to. Why do you want to deal with all this pain? But I have a saying that from pain comes strength, and from strength comes resilience, and from resilience comes life. And so I look at that and I'm like, if I didn't have all of that, I wouldn't have I wouldn't be who I am. And I absolutely love and adore who I am,
Yeah, so. Brilliant. I'd love to hear that. And are you back 100% back to is your brain back to how it should be now at this stage?
I believe for the most part, yes. I remember it took me 6 years. It wasn't until mid 2020 and I started really doing some deep work on my healing of like traumas, that I started to unlock things. And so I would like to say that yes, I'm 100% back. I don't know if I am completely, just because I can remember things in the moments, but to try and recall some stuff at times, I don't have that all there.
Yeah.
However, I do know that the more I continue to do the trauma work and integrate all these parts of myself that have been lost or stuck in, the traumas, that more and more will come back.
Yeah.
And so it just takes time.
And I love the fact that you're sharing these experiences and turning it into positive by helping other women. So what kind of work do you do with other women?
So with other women, I'm an integrative life coach. I use the term that I'm a spiritual midwife and holistic alchemist. And I say that because I help women birth their like authentic self. So I consider myself a midwife in that way, but I'm doing it through a spiritual lens of being like, okay, who do you want to be? Where are you at, and who are you right now, and who do you want to be, and how can we get there? What steps do you need to take to release who you were, so you can really be your authentic self? And that's truly what I know most of us want to be, is just to be our authentic selves, like being doing what we love, having the life of our dreams, being fully realized and actualized in our daily life, and be like, I have purpose, I have meaning, I'm doing something important for me. And so I help women to create that, to find that in themselves. So using different coaching techniques and parts work, meditation, going in, I'll walk with them into the shadows of their trauma and be like, okay, let me hold your hand. We'll go as far as you're ready to go. Let's shine a little bit of light on that. And then we can come back and we can integrate that. And then we can take a little and go further. So kind of taking other people through the process that I did for myself. And then I do energy healing along the way with that. So I create this whole modality where I'm not only doing the parts work and the shadow work and teaching meditation and all of that, but I'm actually teaching them how to heal themselves. I connect them with their inner light, with their inner source.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing your story today. How can people find you, Shandra?
Sure. So I have a website, I got the woo, so IGOTTHEWOO.com. I am on Instagram at Celtic Healer Shandra, and that's CELTIC Healer, SHANDRA. I am on Facebook, Healings of Light and Love by Shandra. And those are all my socials. And I did want to offer any listeners, if they're interested in finding out what I do and how I might be able to be a guide for them, for a 50% off any sessions I do. So the code is Love and Light.
Lovely. I'll put that all on the show notes so they can access that. That'd be amazing. Thank you.
Of course, yeah.
My last question that I ask all my guests, because I think women are particularly bad at accepting compliments. So if you were to pay yourself a compliment, Shandra, what would it be?
You are an amazing shining star, and your light is so illuminating that you're always going to be able to find your way.
Perfect way to end. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your story. What an incredible journey, and I'm so glad to hear that the positive outcome from it. It's been amazing to talk to you, so thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you. I enjoyed being here with you, Rachel.
Lovely to connect. Thank you so much. Take care.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, what an inspiring interview with Shandra, and I can't begin to imagine what it must have felt like to have been in the wilderness for those years of not really knowing who you are, and also what a reminder about journaling. So let's remind ourselves to journal a lot more, because you never know when you're going to need it. I'm a huge fan of journaling, and also write a gratitude journal every night as well. Certainly through the pandemic, it's been a huge source of comfort for me, and it's really kept me grounded and to remember the things that are important in life. So, perhaps Chandra's story is a definite reminder of journaling a lot more and see if it works for you. But it's about trusting your instincts, isn't it? And I think in midlife, we do have to refine that sometimes, because, life gets in the way. So if this is reminded me, if anything, is to trust your gut instinct and to trust yourself and to follow your dreams and to know that it's, put it out there and see what happens. So really great to talk to Shandra. I will be back next week with another dose of inspiration for you. But in the meantime, have a great week, and I'll be back soon.